right. I'll just, as we start, this session talks about, is about online safety. And as we start, let me just go around, before we go to the participants, just to ask you, what is the one thing that you care most about the internet? Just one word. What's the one thing that you care about? Or you can just shout, yes?
My money.
My money. Your money?
Privacy.
Privacy? Reliability? Information democratization? Access to? Accessibility for women? Or is it access to women? That's his contribution. Alright, what else? On this side, what do you care about most?
Universal accessibility.
Universal accessibility? Exposure. Compliance. Interesting. Alright, what do we fear most about the internet? Exposure, yeah. Being stopped? Hackers? Being stolen? Identity theft? Moral decay? Excessive government control, yes? Being misjudged.
My children getting exposed to the wrong things.
Children being exposed to the wrong things. Interesting. Any last views?
Spyware.
Spyware. All right. Very interesting thoughts there. So what I want our panel to talk about is how do you balance those two concerns? How do you balance our fears? How can we be safe online? What are they doing about it? And how can we enjoy those things that we care about online? So I'd like to start with Ashnah. Ashnah from CPESA. You want OpenNet Africa. You could explain to us what are some of those threats from your studies that you've identified in about 2 to 3 minutes? Is it possible? Okay.
Thank you, Victor. Good afternoon, everyone. I've been introduced. My name is Ashnah Kalemera. I work with a collaboration on international ICT policy for East and Southern Africa. That's CPESA. On the program, it's indicated as OpenNet Africa. OpenNet Africa is one of our initiatives, and it's focused on promoting and monitoring internet freedoms in select African countries. I think Victor's session pretty much summed up everything that I'm going to say, or my fellow panelists are going to say. The balance between all the issues that you mentioned that you want to enjoy online and the ones that you fear online. So you mentioned issues around access, and then access to women. Access for women, access to women. That's a very fine and delicate line. You mentioned exposure and networking, networking, the issues around freedom of assembly and association, which you have online, offline, that you should enjoy online, privacy and government control, all the buzzwords that you said. So the threats in the region, in the East African region, have been explored earlier on. Issues around the legislative environment. We've mentioned the interception of communications, the National Security Service Act in Kenya, we mentioned the Cybercrimes Act in Tanzania, access to information bills, the ones that exist but are not very well implemented, the ones that do not exist but are continually being discussed, but still don't get to enjoy our right to access to information. But that's just in text or in the legal environment. But there are actual physical threats that are translating, and we're witnessing them every day, or we are seeing people seeing people that are either faced with abuses or are suffering from violations of internet freedoms. And to give you a few examples, there have been issues around government requests for data. Google disclosure reports show that Kenya has asked for 2 disclosures of individuals that are using Google services. Of course, they were declined, but it shows that, in as much as you're worried about the national security bill, the government is actually approaching intermediaries and asking for disclosure of user information. That was 2014, the Kenya request that I mentioned. In Uganda, there was one in 2013. They're very small requests compared to the big giants that America and the EU and Europe. They make a lot more requests for their citizens. But considering our penetration is not as much as it is in the West, it's still worrying that if we have 20% in Uganda of citizens accessing the internet, who is that one individual that the government is asking information from Google for? Vodafone has also shown that governments are asking for user data. Tanzania asked for nearly 100,000 disclosure requests from Vodafone. The government of Kenya, we don't know what they've asked for because the Official Secrets Act and Intelligence Act mandate that Vodafone is not able to disclose. But if Tanzania is asking for 98,000 and they only have about 20% of their population using the internet and 70% using mobile, what about Kenya, whose penetration is much higher? We do not know, so that's a threat. There are lots of other threats. Earlier on, Jean-Paul mentioned what happened in Burundi. The ARCT asking telecoms to restrict access to WhatsApp and SMS during the upheavals. We all know, or at least the Kenyans very well know, about the bloggers that are making headlines across the world. Robert Alai, Alan Wandi. So those are actual threats. They're not just the legal provisions that we're discussing. They're not just issues around affordability or issues around, network. Is the network good enough or not? These are actual physical threats to the freedoms that we're supposed to enjoy offline and online. What else did I want to say? WikiLeaks. We had not too long ago that Kenya and Uganda are trying to get malware software. So not malware software. Software that works in the same way that malware does. So it's able to detect what you're doing on your machines and, do all the things that Snowden and everyone else in GCHQ talks about. They seem very far away, but the threats are here and they're very real. Away from government surveillance and intermediary liability around disclosure is the issue of cybercrime. We've all mentioned that you want your money to be safe, but that threat is also high and emerging. Last December, Rwanda had a case of fraud in Tigo. Tigo is an operator there, which cost an estimated 495 million francs. That was the cost of the case. Tanzania in 2012 had 627 cyber crimes. In February, just between February and January and February this year, there are 28 incidents of crime originating from Tanzania to the outside world. That's not crime within Tanzania, it's just crimes that originating from Tanzania to the outside world. Maybe phishing, ATM fraud, mobile money fraud, all those crimes, but destined to outside of Tanzania. Kenya, you've had social media accounts for government officials being hacked. Again, that's an adversary or a fraudster or a hacker. It's not a direct government threat, but fellow users abusing the rights that either the officials are enjoying or yourselves and I. Uganda, the police report of 2013 shows there were 62 cybercrime cases. There was a significant loss, financial loss attributed to that. Going back to the issue of access to women, revenge pornography is becoming quite prominent. We're all very aware of that. The victims, unfortunately, are again people like myself, marginalized already in society, and we're continuing to be marginalized online. Our initiative has found that awareness of digital safety and security tools is low. So as much as there are all these threats and challenges that I mentioned, there are lots of tools and techniques that can enable protection, our safety and privacy and data protection online. Unfortunately, not very many of us internet users are aware of these tools, which is obviously not a good thing, considering most of the groups that I mentioned that suffer from threats should be at the forefront of protecting their freedoms online, that is journalists or bloggers or women, but awareness is very low. And that in itself is a threat, because in as much as you can advocate for progressive legislation, what about fraudsters and criminals that are not directly in the region? I think I've exceeded my 3 minutes, but just as an advertising gig, we have the Internet Forum, the Forum on Internet Freedoms next week on Monday and Tuesday here in Kampala, just down the road. You're all very welcome. If you're here in Kampala to visit, please feel free to extend your stay. Enjoy our food and weather, but please do come to the forum on Monday. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. A hand for her. She's mentioned a lot of things, and I want to relate what she's talked about with the next presentation. She's talked about freedoms, cybercrime prevention, awareness, and also legislation. Rina, you work for Article 19, and you've been doing some work on, this charter. Why is it important, and how can it help? Could you just talk briefly about it and why we need to have it? Because from the look of things, the challenge is huge.
Okay, thank you. As Victor introduced, my name is Riva with Article 19. We promote the freedoms of expression and information. This African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedoms was actually a product of the 2013 Africa IGF. And there was a subsequent meeting in early of 2014 in which there was a broad meeting which sought to initiate drafting. And thereafter a smaller drafting group came up with the text. And so I'm happy to present this most recent version, which was amended this week. And it's intended to give us a guide on principles that we can use to inform policy. So I'm going to ask you if you can. The website is on the screen. It's African Internet Rights. Is it? Yeah. .org to have a look and to endorse it. Because this is an African-led initiative. This is developed by the very people that are in this room, and it seeks to address a lot of the issues that we've been discussing this morning. Specifically about cybersecurity, the tendency of governments is to misunderstand cybersecurity with cybercrime. So their tendency is to regulate heavily against content as opposed to maintaining the integrity of information systems. So this declaration really, it speaks to the issues that we are dealing with at the moment, that there is a rapid uptake of the internet, and so we're moving very quickly from a low regulatory environment to a very highly regulated one that misunderstands cybersecurity and so uses this legitimate restriction to restrict legitimate free expression. There are 11 principles in total, and they build on a lot of national, regional, and international principles and standards, including the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression, which was generated in much the same way as this one, the Platform and Access to Information Declaration, the Joint Declaration concerning Freedom of Expression and the Internet by the 4 special rapporteurs on freedom of expression. So I'll go very quickly through some of the principles, and that one is about openness. We keep talking about equitable access, and so this principle really recognizes the need to make the internet an open space in the way that it's architectured. Principle 2 is on access and affordability. Access. I like the question that they raised this morning about how can we regulate something that we don't have. So we really need to promote access, and in so doing also its affordability. And this means government taking up or supporting infrastructure. It means promoting non-discrimination. It means not cutting internet or slowing it down for reasons of national security or public order. Because freedom of expression online and offline, and the internet, this highway is a means to publicly participate, and in so doing enhance your dignity and human development. Freedom of expression is the 3rd principle, and it speaks here to the role of intermediaries. I know there's been a tendency to hold them liable for content they're not even responsible for, or to censor content that again they're not responsible for. But that because yes, they have a big role to play in intermediary liability, let's have their processes of taking down content as transparent as possible, and also for there to be provisions for appeal. There's freedom of expression online. It also extends to protecting citizen journalists, understanding that a lot of our content is now developed by citizen journalists, and abolishing anti-free speech legislation, which includes criminal defamation and sedition, which again are often the excuses for clamping down on content. Principle 4 relates to right to information, and then this speaks to good data management, good data protection management. Principle number 5, freedom of assembly and association. Principle 6, cultural and linguistic diversity, recognizing that we have a lot of languages, and even the tools that we develop should recognize these languages so that we keep them alive. Cultural diversity enhances and enriches development. So they should applying those principles. Principle number 7 relates to the right to development. Number 8 is on the right to privacy. And this relates to data protection principles, including not collecting more data than what you say you're specifying it for, not keeping it for longer than you say you need it for, or it's necessary, and then allowing the person whose data you have to be able to correct it, to access it, and to be protected from it being unauthoritatively disclosed. So if it is lost, stolen, or abused, they should be notified about it, and the public should be warned in general about the potential for the loss of data. Principle number 5, security on the internet, which is what Asa talked about. You have a right to be protected from online criminal activities, including unlawful surveillance and monitoring. You'll see throughout the whole declaration, we reiterate the principles of legality, necessity, and proportionality in these interventions on regulating the internet. So specifically on surveillance, it should be targeted, it should abide by criminal laws, so there should be reasonable suspicion, it should be judicially authorized, and anyone surveilled should be notified that they are being surveilled, and again there should be strong parliamentary oversight so that there isn't indiscriminate mass surveillance. Number 10 relates to marginalized groups, again allowing the internet to be a space to facilitate their inclusion. We've talked a lot about inclusion. And the last one on gender equality, which again Asa talked about. The rest of the declaration will see gives a call, so for different stakeholders, how they can participate, for governments and companies to recognize human rights principles, for civil society, media, to create more awareness on the principles, for academia to contribute to these discussions, and technical communities also to develop tools to promote human rights. So yes, it's important because I think it speaks to a lot of the issues that we've addressed, and I think we all need to endorse it because this is a document that speaks to our issues, which is generated by ourselves for ourselves.
Thank you very much, Riva. Let's give a hand to Riva. Yes, the African Declaration is a very important declaration in terms, and I think it's important for all of us to have a go at it and look at it and comment and support it. It's available online at africainternetrights.org. So hop onto the website and have a look and apply it and support it in different ways that you can. Moving on, there is this question of, we've spoken about access, how can we promote access, but at the same time, there's a challenge of e-waste, and how do we balance the need for people to use computers and can afford them cheaply, and also prevent dumping at the same time. So let me introduce Charles to tell us about e-waste and how can we manage our waste, the e-waste well, and at the same time promote access, and what are the challenges regarding e-waste? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, my name is Charles Oluoch. I work for the Kenya Forest Research Institute, the member of ISOC, which is under rejuvenation. I would like to say that I have been the past chair of ISOC and I've had the opportunity to actually engage and interact with the stakeholders and policymakers in the region. That's how I managed to get into this discussion on the e-waste. I think most people discuss so much on, when it comes to ICT, the important things we discuss about cybersecurity, production of local content, data protection, privacy, security, and policy. But in all these things, people forget now, what are the drivers of this? What drives all these things, content? So, e-waste in short definition is electronic waste. That one defines every electronic device. And e-waste is anything that you use that its end of use, when it's carded, is e-waste. So at the moment, we don't have proper regulations and procedures of dumping, of controlling this e-waste. So there's been a problem, a concern in the region. So East African organization under IACO, and Working Group 10, in April, formed a committee to try and bring up policy issues for the region to manage these e-waste issues. Because there were problems all over on e-waste, because there are lots of machines being brought in from every region, computers, telephones, etc., etc., etc. So in a report from the UN recently, there's a 41.8 million metric tons of US admin were being produced in 2014. And in May, 90% of the world's electronic waste, the contribution was about 18.5 billion to be dumped every year. And you have seen, most of this e-waste or the used materials are being dumped into Africa. And in Africa, we don't have policies and regulations that control the use of cycling these issues so that they can be actually managed properly. So it was an important point to bring up this discussion in this forum, so that we can also include this topic in the Eastern Government Forum, to also contribute to the discussions on this issue. That's why I actually have the opportunity to give this presentation so that we can include it in the discussion. So, as you see, in our dumping sites, there are no procedures for collection of e-waste. Most of these end up in the dumping sites whereby scavengers go up, get them. Sometimes they are burnt, and they end up, polluting the environment. And as a result, it affects the people and even the animals. So if you look at the recent reports of cases of sicknesses like cancer, etc., most in the affluent, people are suffering from cancer, etc., wondering where are the source of these problems coming from. So this was attributed to the profession of e-waste, e-waste, which is currently being done. So most of the e-waste, the devices we use have toxic elements such as mercury, lead, cadmium, arsenic, and barium. So this one affects different parts of our body. So most of us don't actually understand and know. That's why the problem comes in. So we need to create a lot of awareness and know that this thing that we use, that we are good to us, actually hazardous and very dangerous in our lives. Like lead, for example, can cause cancer and disorders. There are many problems. You can see in the previous photos, people are exposed to circuit boards, which have elements and circuitry made of solder and switch, etc., which actually contain these harmful and hazardous materials. And you see that even in our working areas and environments, people actually don't have actual procedures for health working or good health working conditions for handling these equipments. Sometimes they use their own hands, and they expose themselves to these hazardous materials, like the PVC, that's the coating of the wires, which actually are contain dangerous and active elements. So this exposure is all over, and it ends up being polluting soil, water, and vegetables that end up in actually some of our food that we eat that are being contaminated without our knowledge. One of the most dangerous elements in the US in the electronic is mercury, which affects our body. So the main point, there are uses of disposal and recycling. All these elements are supposed to be disposed of, recycled in a proper way. What the equipment we use in our offices, homes, etc., that have this circuit board need to be disposed of in a proper way. It's not done in a proper way. So the disposal method is never done properly. So they end up polluting our environment. So what are there for? What can we do to avert these problems? So there's an opportunity in the US that we can create opportunities for creating recycling ventures and learning opportunities, because it's a new area that emerging in this region. So we can take an opportunity and create that, and also do some education and training in these areas, and as well as contribute to the legislative process that's actually going on. Currently, there are processes of after the INSEF organization came up with a draft policy, which was supposed to be adopted by these African countries for domesticated for legislation, so that they can be implemented to address these issues. So we need to continue the discussion in this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's give him a hand. All right. So moving on, and he's mentioned a lot of things that we need to take into consideration with those who supply ICT products, to advise also the users about the dangers that those devices have, and the need for them to be properly disposed. So moving on, I'd like to introduce the next speaker, Arnold, Mageni from Uganda. The government has been bashed for doing different things, or overdoing some things, for example, over legislating or over snapping. What are some of the best practices that you'd want to encourage people in the region to start adopting under the governments, based on your experience in Uganda?
Thank you, Victor.
3 minutes.
My name is Arnold, Mageni from National IT Authority. The subject is very interesting. We're supposed to be looking at ways how we combat cyber crime using strategies that, of course, at the end of the day need to be assessed for effectiveness. As a region, as part of the Northern Corridor, we tried a couple of recommendations which seem to be working, but of course every one of them recommends that there is some internal housekeeping that needs to be done by every one of the states before you can embrace the regional efforts, because you know cybercrime cannot be fought as individuals. We need concerted efforts. Some of the recommendations that have come through has been to harmonize the laws that we have in a region, to enable us as a region have a uniform definition of what crime is, to enable exfiltration of criminals that are in other countries that have committed crime in our countries. Because as you notice, the cyber world has no boundaries physically, but of course at one stage it will touch the ground, and in that country, if the crime that you think has been committed isn't one, then you won't be helped much. So we need to harmonize in that area. It also recommends to have a regional cybersecurity strategy that aims at providing an overarching way of how we as a region are going to embrace this issue of crime in the cyber world. It recommends doing training and capacity building in the region, establishing a regional information security framework, as well as a center of excellence, because we do realize that most of the training that we undertake, and of course this one is informed by the fact that almost 100% of the products that we deploy to manage information security are all foreign. So most of the trainings that we do have are actually influenced by the products that we deploy. It does recommend some initiatives that can be undertaken to create a safe and secure transaction environment. We've seen Kenya has deployed PKI to boost confidence and trust in the consumption of e-government services, and Rwanda has followed suit. Uganda is about to do the same, and South Sudan. So when we leave that area and we come to what we've done as a country, Uganda, for strategy, we've broken it down into 3 areas. There's an area where we're supposed to create an environment that makes it hard for cyber criminals to trade, and for that what we've done is we have created legislations. We have the Computer Misuse Act, we have the E-Transactions Act, E-Signatures Act, plus regulations. We have the Data Privacy Bill, which will be considered and to become an act. We have Access to Information Act, amongst others. We did develop a strategy through the Ministry of ICT in 2011, which was called the National Information Security Strategy. And from it, we've been able to achieve a couple of initiatives. The first key of them has been the formation of the National Information Security Advisory Group, which is a fusion of private and public sector institutions, and they have the mandate of discussing information security at national level and coming up with actionable initiatives that can try to lower the potential for loss in the event that the risks were to really pass. Then we did create a National Information Security Framework, which is for use by both private sector and public sector. It's mandatory to public sector institutions for the same reason that the government is trying to protect all the installations it has. The framework does have definitions for minimum mandatory standards that these institutions are supposed to put in place to ensure that the safety of the infrastructure under their custody is guaranteed. The framework, if you review it, you'll notice it's not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you where to put a firewall, but it just communicates security outcomes, and that is how it manages to stand the test of time. Every institution has the responsibility of using the framework, doing their own risk assessment, and coming up with initiatives that are appropriate to the risk that the institution faces. We do have a definition of critical national infrastructure, which again goes and fuses with the Computer Misuse Act. The requirements in terms of how you're supposed to treat critical national infrastructure and what happens in the event that it's breached are very well stated. It comes with 6 standards that are supposed to help with the implementation, as well as an implementation guide. It broadly discusses information security in 4 areas. Responsibilities known by those that are interface with the systems, because we did realize that most institutions actually have the movers and the checkers as almost the same person. You are an IT guy, you're in charge of IT security, but again, you are reporting to the IT manager. So it becomes very hard. So the framework recommends that we do have, those roles, segregated. On the side of, another pillar that is very important is the one of investigation. Once a crime has happened, we need to investigate. And the help we do have, because of the laws that have been put in place, digital evidence is admissible in the courts of law. And again, we are undertaking training for judicial officers, that is the prosecutors, defense lawyers, investigating officers, and as well as judges. Because we did realize that evidence acquisition, as well as the chain of custody, is most of the times breached during investigations, which makes the evidence that has been tendered not dependable. On the side of incident response, that is once crime has happened, we do have 2 SATs in Uganda. We have one for the communication sector and another for the national service which runs as a coordination center. As part of, there was the scoping mission that was done by the Commonwealth Cybercrime Initiative in 2014, and it did recommend that 1, we're supposed to have tailor-made education courses or programs that should be in a way fostering innovation as well as emergence of local products, as well as building of center of excellences. It recommended the revision of the National Information Security Strategy, which is being done at the moment. Some of you have been consulted in that regard. Some of the achievements that we have registered as a country is the fact that now we can talk to very many stakeholders in fighting cybercrime, and they're all willing. So we do have as well some support that has been registered on the side of development of national cybersecurity strategy from the British government through the Commonwealth Telecommunication Office. There was a ranking that was done by the I2U. It's called it's the Global Cybersecurity Index, and we ranked 10 as a country globally, as well as we ranked second in the region. And the region, which is Africa, it excludes Arab states. Thank you very much.
Let's give him a hand. So, are you feeling safe? All those good things they said they're doing?
Yes.
Yes, no?
Yes.
Work in progress. All right, now I want to move to the final presenter. This is Vincent from Rwanda. Oh yes, you have a presentation.
Thank you, Moderator. I don't have a presentation, but I'll be quick because I don't have time. I share with you the one experience in terms of cybersecurity. I also talk about policy and the regulatory framework, and I will touch on regional initiative because Peter has talked about this initiative, and I will just talk a few words on this initiative. So, okay, well, I think the PowerPoint to working. Okay, just continue. No, just go back. Just like introduction, we have an initiative we want to implement some projects that can help us to deal with cyber crimes. So because you know that there are some challenges around the world, so just continue. These are some challenges that can, even if we talk about these challenges, there's so many challenges that are on the internet. So we say that you should put up some policy and strategies that can help us to deal with all these challenges that are coming with the internet. As you can continue. I'll be brief. We have a vision 2020. We have some projects that we have to run, and it's we do have a niche plan in 4 phases. So now we are in this 3rd phase, and normally we've had some projects that are related to cybersecurity that we are now implementing in our country. Continue. Yes, you continue. That's the current status in our country in terms of cybersecurity project. Just go back. We have a national cybersecurity policy that is approved by the cabinet. We have now a draft law establishing the National Cybersecurity Agency in Rwanda. We have already established the Rwanda competence post team. It is established and working, and we have already fully implemented our road certification system in Rwanda. And we are installing just the government certification system also. We have also developed some legal regulatory framework related to cybersecurity, like that's the certification service provider regulation, and they are waiting their approval by the regulatory board. I think the same like the previous one, just continue. That's the energy plan that I have been talking about. Let's continue. Normally, RURA is the Rwanda Utilities Regulatory Agency or authority is in charge of managing the road certification system, and we shall be having the private certification system that will be providing digital signatures to end users. So as of now, we have already finished to implement the route CA, which is managed by Rwanda Utilities Regulatory Authority, and we even encourage just private sector to invest in certification service provision. And we are now implementing the one for the government and partnership with South Korea. Continue. These are expected that from our national SAT. It is now working, and because we do have a team that is dealing with this, which is managing this SAT, and we have experts from different areas that are working in the SAT. Continue. These are services that are provided by our SAT. We do alert and the vulnerability handling and artifact handling. This is the institutional framework that is running the ICT sector in Rwanda. And this is the regulatory framework that we are using. We have telecom law, the social law, electronic message and signature law, or can call it the transaction law. As I told you, there is this draft regulation governing certification service provider. We do have ICT in pipeline that will be just combining all ICT-related issues. These are now I'm going to talk about the digital initiative that we have related to cybersecurity. Because we do have EACO, East African Unification Organization, which is also dealing with cybersecurity issues. We do have, as I told you, in international cooperation, we are cooperating with KISA. It's a Korea Internet Security Agency. We are partnering with them to implement some projects in our country. But we do have some member countries who are also dealing with who have partnered with IT impact in order to implement some cybersecurity projects. We also attend some. We have also attended Study Group 17 in ITU, which is also dealing with security, and we do have a member of our region, which is active participant and one of the chair of the study group, who is Patrick Nisigwa, even he's here with us in this gathering. And we do have also working group 5 in Yako. This working group is also dealing with regulatory issues and regional projects related to cybersecurity in our region. We do have a legal committee which is dealing also with cyber law in terms of the region. As you know, in Africa we do have now what we call EU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection, adopted on 27th June 2014 in Malabo. The document is in force now. We do have also East Africa Electronic Transaction Bill 2014. It is spearheaded by ARA, East African Legislation Assembly, and those are some measures that are being put in place to deal with cybersecurity and cybercrime issues in the region. These are some recommendations that are drawn from the recommendation of the East African Community Organization, and they are encouraging member states just to implement some policy and legal policy that can help to deal with cybersecurity and cybercrime issues in our region. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vincent. Those are very interesting developments from Rwanda that I think other countries can also learn from. I just noticed that we have a practice of having so many legislation as draft regulations or draft bills, which I hope, unlike Kenya, you actually do pass them when the time comes. So I'd like to open briefly for a quick plenary session because of time, and welcome by show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's take those 3 in that order. Keep your question brief or comment brief.
Thank you very much, Victor and the panelists. I think this is an interesting topic. Mine are just 2 points that I want to raise. I think especially on the side of cybersecurity, as a region or as Africa in general, the world is so far ahead of us in so many ways. I don't know if we'll really be able to make any significant, meaningful inputs into the global debate or dialogue. But I do think that we have a lot to learn, especially in terms of filling in the gaps or addressing challenges that we have back here at home. So I hope that some of the outputs from this engagement that we have here will be able to single out or identify those that ought to go back to our respective governments in our countries as specific recommendations that have come out of the EA-IGF deliberations, so that we're not only shaping inputs to the global IGF debate, but we're also looking at what we can take back home for local implementation. And in that regard, I just want to highlight one particular aspect, especially relating to cybersecurity, that I believe is a situation that still pertains up until today. And this is really to do with the issues of capacity. I'll risk putting my neck on the line and saying that we do not, as a region, have the technical capacity to really be able to effectively manage and handle and administer our own cybersecurity regimes. The reason I say this is because if you look closely, all of our countries have been working in this area or on initiatives in these areas for the past few years, but we have constantly and throughout been depending on external specialists. It's not a bad thing, but it's also very important that we have our own in-house capacity. I remember when we were busy working on setting up the PKI, the public PKI route in Kenya, we had to get specialists from South Africa because there were no cryptographers. I'll just take a quick, audit. You all know people who have done computer science, mathematics, etc. How many of you personally know an African cryptographer? By show of hands. You know personally one African cryptographer here in Africa? Okay. 1 out of, or 2 out of a room of, I don't know how many, yeah? So this is a problem that we have. So we had to actually engage cryptographers from South Africa to come in and help implement our PKI infrastructure. Now, if we go beyond that and we ask for cryptanalysts, I think we will have 0. Because cryptographers encrypt messages or write the encryption or come up with the encryption algorithms to secure communications. Cryptanalysts decrypt. So cryptanalysts operate at another higher level than even the cryptographers because they have to be able to actually unpack or open up these encrypted messages. So I just want to highlight that as an input that ought to go back to our respective governments within the region. it ought to be handled as part of our national strategies, where deliberate steps are being made to encourage the development of cryptographers, cryptanalysts. Maybe from a government perspective, they can put aside special scholarships for really people who are excellent or excelling in mathematics, or people who are excelling in computer science, that they can get scholarships to go and actually become cryptographers. If we don't take these kind of steps and initiatives into our own hands, we will find ourselves in the situations where many countries around the world are finding themselves. You bring in external experts, they set up your systems, they build back doors so that they see your information before you see it. And you are not secure at the end of the day.
Thank you. Next. Person, it's interesting you mentioned capacities. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever been to a police station and seen a computer? It's talking about cryptography.
Thank you very much. I'm Patrick Mwesigwa, and I work with the Uganda Communications Commission. And I want to thank the panelists for those very informative interventions. Now, Vincent talked about the AU Convention on Cyber Security and Privacy. Actually, I didn't know about this convention until 3 weeks ago when I was in an AU meeting, and AU was actually lamenting that although we adopted this convention, very good convention, in 2014, June, up to now, less than 10 African countries have ratified this convention. And it's a very good document. It will help to strengthen collaboration in fighting cyber threats. So I would really appeal to colleagues in this forum to engage their governments and make sure that they ratify this AU Convention on cyber security. Thank you.
There's 2 hands on that side.
Thank you. My question is on the issue of rights and government surveillance and government requests to intermediaries. You made a very good case from your point of view as to why this should be worrying us. Government, on the other hand, will make a very good case, especially in East Africa or Kenya in particular, where we are facing very serious threats of terrorism, that they actually need this information, they actually need to surveil us so as to protect us as citizens. So my question would be, what are your recommendations on how can we balance these two interests, protecting the citizens and also protecting the citizens' privacy? Because to an extent, I don't think we can put a blanket condemnation on surveillance and governments making requests for data. But on the other hand, we still have to protect privacy.
That question is directed to Grace. The question is directed to Riva. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. My question goes to Charles. I was a bit keen on the dangers of what is contained in these samples, and I was wondering, have you guys, or do you know anybody else that has done some sort of research to find out if, because I can understand that perhaps 10 years ago, cell phones were that dangerous, they contained maybe lead and that other stuff like cadmium and mercury. But how about today? Do the cell phones still contain these things? Thank you.
All right. There's a hand there. Where are the ladies? You can just do, and then we go to the.
My name is Chris Mrola from Rwanda. My question goes to the whole team. It's about the banking sector. The question is, what are the governments doing in terms of public awareness about the contactless cards that are being introduced by local banks into the online transactions market now? Thank you.
Final one. Okay.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Mine is very short. It's just a reaction to Patrick Mosigwa's information about those agreements. As we know, our region is working in a lot of cross-border broadband networks. To which extent are we engaging the owner or operators of those networks in terms of cyber security?
All right.
For this opportunity. Paul is my name from ECU. Mine in regards to Mr. Charles, who spoke about e-management, e-waste management in East Africa. I think my question is going to be very simple because anything to do with the e-management regards any other person within the region of East Africa. Why I'm saying this is because I, on most cases, follow trends about national afforestation programs that I feel, Mr. Charles, in your department, please try to ensure that most of the good ideas that are spoken about are implemented, because the rate at which the trees or the rate at which afforestation and afforestation tech initiative as far as the discussion is concerned is not what actually is being implemented in this house. Because if you go to so many of our villages, you find that not half of the tree that is lost within a year, over the years, is not replaced according to every initiative plan that the government or the stakeholders do have placed. So I'll really say that anything to do with waste management is something very easy, but it is the initiative to ensure that you have more mobilization of the whole mass to ensure that at least within an area we are able to conserve the environment. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much for those questions. I don't know if Arnold want to take a bite from the floor, but I'd like to give my panelists a chance to respond. Just quickly, 1 minute, and if there's any person in the floor who feels he has something to add, please let me know. So we can take it from there. Just take it very quickly. 1 minute for the questions. The first one was about how are we involved in a global debate, the aspect of capacity, governments putting in money, on can they put in money to fund the growth of capacity, the AU Convention, government surveillance versus a request for information. How do we balance freedoms and security? Is there research on e-waste, and how can we implement these recommendations? Questions about the role of government in creating public awareness, especially products around banking and other e-transactions, and how are we engaging industry on cybersecurity? So take it from the top here.
Okay, thank you very much. The issue of us being able to make input into global cybersecurity efforts, yes, we do have the potential. Since I'll speak for Uganda, we are members of the CTO, we are members of the ITU as well as the Oxford Global Cybersecurity Center. So our presence there can help us take the issues that we find are pertinent for discussion on that bigger scene. The other issue that I can talk about is one of national security versus privacy, but given the fact that I come from government, they will think I'm biased. But again, I will speak as an individual. The amount of information that we put out there that is not necessary is also alarming, and if we mind our own privacy, we can utilize these very advanced developments very well, and the issues of national security will not be any that we should be concerned about. Thank you.
In response to Brian regarding capacity, it's very worrying when our very own do not have faith in our very own. I don't think it's a good practice for us to import practices from the West or whatever the developed world is. We can import best practices and benchmarks. We certainly have the capacity through the innovation hubs, through the academic institutions that we have, to have cryptography. So I completely disagree with your submission in the lack of capacity in cryptography or any other cybersecurity related issue. From the lady from Kitchenet, yes, terrorism is a threat. National security must be upheld. Hate speech is a threat. But what we're asking for is judicial oversight. Where interception is mandated, there should be warrants of arrest. Warrants of interception, and there should be oversight in the process of obtaining those warrants for interception of communications. There should be transparency in the investigations and also requests for disclosure. It's not just the issue of transparency, but it also cultivates trusts, us as users and also in the governments and law enforcement agencies. That, oh yeah, this is what we do when we're investigating a crime, and this is X, Y, and Z. And as a citizen, I would probably feel safer by the fact that the government is disclosing what they're doing and showing good faith in what they're doing, not just blind censorship or blind interception without any oversight. Contactless cards, I can't say anything about that. I haven't seen any in the region. But again, sometimes we put so much emphasis on somebody else protecting us. We must keep our banking information very personal. It's the same way you protect any other personal information. Do not disclose your PIN. Those are some of the basics. We can't have solutions coming from I don't know where all the time.
I think you addressed the question on national security and civil liberties, but if I could just add, the freedom of expression is not absolute. As you mentioned, there is hate speech, there are restrictions on defamation and copyright. But like again, we emphasize the three-part test of legality, necessity, and proportionality. National security is very much a legitimate restriction. But I think we also forget often that national security reasons are often used to limit civil liberties and to limit legitimate dissent in the name of preventing terrorism. We forget that yesterday's terrorists, those who were branded terrorists yesterday, are today's leaders. That was true for Nelson Mandela, that was true for the SPLA. If you were watching the Security Laws Amendment Act case in Kenya, they were calling NGOs, and Africa in particular, they were calling them terrorists because we were just dissenting and it was legitimate. So let's just remember that secrecy, it's a breeding ground for corruption and abuse of power. And that's why we try to promote that three-part test and judicial oversight for warrants of arrest, etc.
Thank you. Just go to the question on research on data on hazardous elements of cell phones. As we all know, there's been an increase of use of cell phones in the region, especially in Kenya, whereby the cost of the phones has gone low. And this is causing a concern because we actually don't have data on how the components, the elements that are used in these components. As Susan explained earlier, some of these dangerous chemicals, elements like mercury and lead, compose the elements that are used in these cell phones. And I studied some studies online saying that most of the developed countries have actually banned devices which are made from some of these elements. They are no longer allowed to be used in those countries. Whereas in these regions, actually there is no awareness or discussion on the same. So as we increase the use of these cell phones due to the increase of technology and cost, we're actually exposing ourselves to the hazardous elements that are actually emitted by these devices. So we need to actually be aware. And then now here comes a case whereby we need to actually do some studies and analyze how this one comes to be, because I understand myself, I've done some electronics engineering a bit, I know that these devices, the higher the cost of a device, the lower, the safer it is to use. So the cheaper a device is, the higher the risks in using it. So these are things that we are actually facing as a region. We need to look at these issues and see how we can actually regulate to protect our people against the unseen dangers that actually are in the offing. On the environment conservation, I think e-waste currently is a big problem, and most governments, I think, are integrating e-waste management in their waste conservation. Like in Kenya, we have the Ministry of Environment, Kalemera, engaging stakeholders in actually trying to get into the management of waste, so that e-waste is actually is included in the waste management, so that we don't actually pollute the environment, because it's been seen that this is a very big problem which is actually rising up, and it can reach dangerous levels in the future. So it's a concern that has been seen, and the study is going on, and I hope in the future this will come up and issues will be addressed. Thank you.
On the issue, on the question related to capacity, technical capacity, in our case in Rwanda, we are organizing some training related to cybersecurity, and I'd like to mention that recently we've organized a night cyber training that has been just was in Kigali. And we do have a partnership with some international companies that can help us to deal with security issues. And IT is also developing some regional cybersecurity centers that will help to deal with capacity building for engineers and managers on issues related to cybersecurity. And we do have a strategy for the knowledge transfer in our country, where when you do have a big project, just engage university students so that the expert can transfer that knowledge to the student. And at the end of the project, the student themselves can still run the project. And they know how to manage the source or the code and things like that. We have also brought on the market the national university, which is called Kalemera University, and they're providing just the Master of Science in IT, so they are advanced and just want to make sure that we have a university that has a reputation in IT. And just I would want to thank Ms. Riva on the intervention you made, because we have to inform our government that they have to ratify that convention. On the issue to contact risk cards, I know in so many countries they do have this kind of cards. And for example, in our country, even I think even in Tanzania, the telecom regulator is having the MOU with the central bank so they can handle the telecommunication issue, security issues. So in our case, as long as you know these issues, I think we can discuss on it with the central bank, and even we can discuss on with the computer response team so that we can prevent the incident to happen. We do have also the ICT application working group, which is dealing with issues related to e-transaction. I think in the East African Communication Organization, I think we shall make sure that we discuss on this issue of contactless cards and see if there is something which is caused by these cards. At what extent do the government is engaging the private operators in terms of cybersecurity. So we do have a platform in East Africa. We do have working file where operators and the government and society are invited so that they can discuss on cybersecurity issues. And we do have also national platform that we can discuss on cybersecurity issues. Even some governments are developing telecommunication security guidelines that can help to curb the issue related to security of telecommunication networks. I think that's all.
All right, thank you very much. Those are very excellent contributions from both the plenary and the panelists. Just to wrap them up, and some of the things that standing out for me is that the governments, regional countries need to continue being involved in the global debate. I remember in Kenya, the president said, your security is your own responsibility, and that you also need to start being careful, and also what has been said about creating more awareness for the people to know, because it starts with you to some extent, but also it doesn't mean that government doesn't have the responsibility to do what it needs to do. That includes, passing the legislation in consideration with the issues that are not like the three parties: legality, necessity, and proportionality, so that we have a proper balance between our national security interests and also respect for fundamental human rights and freedoms. Another thing is that, the cheaper the device, the higher the damage. Maybe we need to encourage tax incentives for so that those expensive devices become more cheaper, and we don't have feature phones and cheap devices. And at the same time, the fact that involving all stakeholders is important, and collaboration not only between stakeholders but also within government agencies. And hopefully, Vincent, in Rwanda, you will, over and above having the Master of Science in IT, to have one on cryptography, as had been suggested, so that you can export all the Africans to learn in Africa and to be taught by Africans. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. We've come to the end of this. Let's give a round of applause for this.